Emma Chadwick.
Still present.
Present.
Gail Conley.
Present.
Alison Conan. Aaron Gildermeister. Edie Grenning. Diane Pearson Glitman. Ethan Maurer.
Present.
Stuart Marjo.
Present.
Katie Nelson. Lisa Pollock. Present. Andrew Kwan.
Thanks, Pat. Gonna open it up for community comments. Anybody from our community or representing any comments from the community? Seeing none, I'd like to move on. Look at that, we're caught up in the agenda. I'm gonna turn this over to you, John.
So in my superintendent report, and I know you talked that we had warned these at the last meeting, but these are model policies that were prepared by the Vermont Superintendent Association and the Vermont School Boards Association in conjunction with the AOE and legal counsel. The policies that we've presented tonight are model policies. These are required by statute, and the details that are in them are directly related to actual terms in the statute. So I'm recommending that we approve these without edit, and then we will be implementing the conditions that are in these policies.
Move they approve these policies.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Policies pass. When was the discussion piece supposed to happen? Was that after or before a vote?
After.
Okay, any discussion?
But we had that discussion. You don't remember that?
Oh, no, that's too far away for me.
In between when the motion is seconded and the vote is discussion.
Thank you. I still think they pass.
Yep.
Hey, John, do you want to take us into the continuous improvement plan?
I will open it up, and then I'm gonna hand it off to Andrew, because Andrew had was integral in drafting it, putting it together, and having the Agency of Education give its blessing to this particular plan. I offered a little bit of context in the superintendent's report. This is a plan that has to be that we have to have if we're going to get state and federal funds. So Andrew's going to talk a little bit about it and take any questions that you have.
Yeah, so it's called a Continuous Improvement Plan, or CIP, because there's a lot of acronyms in education. And this is basically the template that all school districts use that has been developed by the Agency of Education. And this is related to the funding that school districts get, specifically Title I funds and Title II funds. And really the intent is to, and then that's connected with some federal regulations that the AOE then interprets and then relays out to school districts here in Vermont. The intent is to make sure that we are setting goals and monitoring those goals, and that those goals are also aligned with the funds that we're getting. One point to kind of look at is the collaborative stakeholder piece. So this plan really was informed from the work that was done related to our district priorities. So if you look at this, it's directly tied to our district priorities. The first one is under safe and healthy schools. So another kind of thing to know around the CIP is you have to have two goals. One that is associated with the safe and healthy schools component, and one that's associated with academic achievement. The safe and healthy schools one, and I'll dig into this more when we get to the district priorities piece, but essentially this is connected with the social emotional learning district priority. Specifically, it is looking at monitoring student well-being and belonging, which we'll talk more about when we start going over each of the priorities. And then as you can see, the human, material, and physical resources is directly tied to how we use our Title I and Title II funds. With Title I, we use those for interventionists. For Title II, we use that for our coaches. And the same applies for the academic achievement one. That's directly related to our early grades literacy proficiency goal. And again, our Title I and Title II funds are used in correlation to meet that goal. This plan has already been submitted to the Agency of Education. It was submitted when I put forward the consolidated federal grant, which was due back on June 30th. And the Agency of Education has, as John said, kind of given their blessing to this. So a component of the process is to also have it approved by the school board so that it's kind of part of the broader district process. And so this is kind of one step as a piece of this kind of continuous improvement plan component. But again, this is really, if this weren't in place, we'd still be doing these things because it's associated with our own district priorities. Any questions on that? And this process has actually been around for a while. So we're just making sure that we're checking the boxes for the Agency of Education, these things. Any questions? Yeah, Ethan.
I think there are a couple questions, but I'll try to keep them limited. So one, just to that point, Andrew, about this has been an ongoing process. Is there any like collection and reflection on past years? Like if this is a yearly thing, do we ever look back at that? And then curious just about the academic achievement. It says 75%, just curious as to where we might be at now. And then when it says spring local assessment literacy benchmarks, is that a internal district assessment or is that a statewide?
Yep. So the 75%, so our district goal is 90% proficiency for third graders by the spring of 2025. And so if there was one piece of the CIP where I utilized my own professional judgment, that was the piece right there. Is I tried to pick something that I felt was achievable given where we're at towards the broader goal of 90%. And so that's kind of our big goal. And so the idea with this CIP is next year, we would see where we ended up at the end of this year. And then I would adjust that number. So this would pretty much all stay the same, except I'd probably just adjust that number to be what I think would make sense for 2024. The local assessments, that's currently the F&P, Fontes, and Pinnell local assessment data. We are, and this is something we'll talk about in a bit, moving to another assessment tool, which will be used in conjunction with F&P. But I guess the short answer to your question is yes, that's a local assessment. And that's what we intend to do for the district priority as well, is to use our own local assessments for a wide variety of reasons. And then I'm trying to remember, and then your other question at the beginning was years past. So this is I'm moving into my third year, but the last several years it's kind of been, they didn't actually even require this because we had our COVID recovery plans, which took the place of the CIPs. And so now we're getting back into the process of having these continuous improvement plans, which essentially are replacing the COVID recovery plans that had been in existence for the last couple of years. And so the intent would be moving forward is that this would be something that we would revisit every year.
Awesome. Thank you for that.
Other questions?
Wait, I'm just for clarification. We'd have this would be our same goal every year, or
So the 75 for the academic achievement one, like that 75% would be updated. And then looking at the goal, up top here for safe and healthy schools, right now, I kept it broad and I just said we will increase the number of students in grades 3 through 12 who indicate that they have a strong sense of belonging. And so as we gather more information, we can drill down and be a little more specific with that. One of the things we'll talk about here in a moment with the district priorities is our actual collection of this data. And so we don't have baseline data yet. So we really need to do that first, and then as we move forward, we can provide more kind of nuance to the prioritized goal moving forward. Good question. Go.
Hey, so to the 75%, if you're into wordsmithing, you might consider or better, just to make that clear, which way we're going with it, but I think we'd be happy with more than 75%.
Definitely.
My question more is around these components are pretty broad: safe and healthy schools and academic achievement. And I think it's great that you picked two that align with our district priorities. Is there any, but they're like narrower in focus. And I would think that there's other components of our district priorities that could also be included. Is there any benefit to expanding the goals? I don't know, but
I don't think so. I think
okay.
keeping it simpler for this work, I think makes the most sense. And for our internal district work, then we can kind of go nuts.
I guess then the follow-up question that I missed in your introduction is, what's the point of this?
It's a requirement of the state, and it comes from the federal government related to the Title I and Title II funding we get.
Is it like binary? If you do it, you get the funding. If you don't, you don't. Or does the content of the plan have any impact?
Content, no.
Yeah, no,
Content does not have any influence.
yeah, no.
I mean, if you don't do it, you don't get the money.
Yeah. So they're not looking, they want to make sure that it's very broad as far as like what the state requires. I would say ours is definitely, we do more than we need to as far as like detail and description. It's a compliance mechanism of the federal government that the AOE passes down to the local education agency.
So assuming there's no other questions, I'll move to accept the plan as proposed, or to approve the plan as proposed.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Is it too late to make that 75 or more?
We can add that in.
Can have it added?
Well, you
Sure.
already submitted it.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't, we can do it for us.
Okay.
Sorry, discussion before voting.
Yeah. We just discussed it. Now we're ready to vote.
Oh, Kevin. Already shaking your head at me.
No, he's shaking his head at something else.
No, it's me. It's fine. I'm cool with it. Any further discussion? Okay. All in favor?
Oh,
Any opposed? Abstentions? Passes.
Excellent. I will let the
Great
state
job.
know.
Thank you, Andrew.
Do you want to put it on the screen? So now we're going to talk about our district priorities, and Andrew and I and some other folks in central office spent some time on collecting some information that we're trying to make it as like concrete and objective as we could be, tangible progress that we're making and some updates on these priorities. So as I think most of you know, last year, a lot of it was making sure that we had plans in place, the resources, and the right people doing the work. So we spent a lot of time last year, making the plans that are going to help us meet our literacy goal and just improve student achievement across the board. So last year, a lot of it was a lot of planning and a lot of preparation. And as we move forward, we're going to be able to collect better baseline data and have better comparisons. But first thing you got to do is you have to have the plan and the resources to get the work done. So you've seen our district priorities. We have, one thing that nobody can say is we have gone over these many, many times. And I think at our admin retreat, it was very affirming to me that I feel like collectively, these are our priorities for the next couple of years. And so it's really improving social, emotional, and mental health, not just for students, but for staff as well. Anti-bias, anti-racism, inclusivity and equity work and efforts, early literacy proficiency, creating a multi-tiered system of support. So making sure that we have 3 really good stages, tiers, that we can track student data and get them the support that they need based on their individual needs. We're focused on data. We're focused on tracking data, and then really collegially, professionally making plans to support students. Then PLCs, that's integrated into all of this. So that's a structure and a system for us to meet all of our priorities. And then also, we're never going to be able to meet our early literacy proficiency grade or meet our ends if we don't have a very aligned, coordinated, comprehensive curriculum. Yeah. This is a visual, just trying to represent these are all interconnected. Hopefully, in the slide that we just went over, and over the last year or so, we have done at least an adequate job of showing how these are all interconnected. These priorities, they're a confluence together, and you can't really meet one taking away from one of the others. So I'm going to start with social emotional learning and health. So we have worked really hard over the last year to try to make sure that we have the systems and the structures in place so that we can get some baseline data. And then, I think our next step, we talked about belonging and well-being. What we're going to be doing is we have a tool now called Panorama. It's a database that we're really integrating this year that's going to help us in the fall know where kids are. Then we are going to reassess that in the winter and then again in the spring to make sure that we are making progress on kids' sense of well-being. So we'll have some baseline data and some comparative data to be able to share with the board. I think one of the other things that we're working on right now with our admin team, are there some other indicators that we want to add in there that we can use for the future? Here's some other tangible things that we do ongoing that we've tried to make even more robust since including this as a priority is we have our monthly meetings with our Green Mountain NEA leadership that really talk about a big part of it, and a common theme is how are staff doing? What do they need? What are some of the issues? What's going well? What isn't? And how can we fix it? We have made this a very absolutely almost sacrosanct. It's something that we do not skip because it has really helped us solve a lot of problems. I also would say that we have 2 negotiated agreements, which does help with staff morale and mental health. And then we really put some time and effort and resources into having really strong wellness programs in every school and making sure that we have a really strong understanding of what our employee assistance program is, what it can do, and making sure that our staff members know where to find short-term counseling help if they're having a substance abuse problem, if they're having problems at home, if they're having financial problems, if they're really having a mental health crisis, where can they get the help? And I can tell you objectively that we have staff that are really utilizing this program when they need it.
Hey, John.
Yes.
sorry to interrupt, but as you go through this, are you looking for questions and feedback throughout, or are you presenting to us?
I thought I would stop at the end of each slide
Okay.
and just take, any comments and feedback that you have. Does that work for folks?
I'm trying to think like you're presenting this just to kind of like get our feedback, right? So,
Well, and give you an update of where we're at.
Yeah.
So I would say both.
Yeah.
One, talk about the progress we've made, talk about some of the things that we still need to do, and, take any feedback that you have
so
or quite any questions.
since I interrupted you and you're not done the chart, but I'll ask anyway. For this one, social emotional learning and mental health, as I'm trying to follow along here, just trying to understand what of these have you done? What of these are going to be worked on in the future? It's just a little bit difficult to gauge like where we are in the process. But it sounds like they're just all kind of, in the works, things that are being focused on.
Well, some are more in place than others.
Okay.
But let me try to highlight that. Let me start from the beginning. Panorama is a database we just purchased that we're going to be implementing this year. Give us good, give us some good data on how kids are doing socially, emotionally. Do they feel like that our schools are inclusive, that they're welcome, that they belong? So that's something that we spent last year really researching and saying, okay, where are we? What do we need? And this is a concrete objective that we met last year that will carry through to meet this priority or address it. Some of these you're always going to be working on. The GMNEA leadership, those discussions are in place and have been. I think after these priorities were put into place and post-COVID, we really doubled down on this. Staff wellness programs, that's another one. These are some things that we do have in place right now that we put a little bit more time and effort and focus on post-COVID. And then our employee assistance program, that has been in place for a while, but we've gotten a lot better, I think, at helping people to access it. And then the training for restorative practices, we have trained some folks around this and implemented some of the practices and strategies, but that we're trying to train more and implement it with a little bit more fidelity and effectiveness. The social emotional learning program we have in place right now and we're using. Counseling options. We've expanded these where we've really tried to meet family needs. If you have a counselor that it's better for them to meet with the student in school and there's permission and they can, then we support families in doing that and in finding counselors that can help kids when it's convenient for them. And sometimes that's during the school day, and we accommodate that. We have, as you know, we've expanded over the last couple of years, social workers in school. We have an additional guidance counselor at Mount Mansfield Union High School, very related to this goal. And we've also provided more school-based support through professional staff and support staff. We also, which is the next bullet, have really, when we can, we've been relying on some of the mental health professionals at the Howard Center to give us some consultation and guidance when we need it. We did this before, but I think there's really more attention to it now. And then Dr. Joelle Van Lent, she helps with both staff and students, and we have, increased our contract time with her. She's been phenomenal, by the way. I would say, you know, some of the training for hazing, harassment, and bullying has been in place, but it's not as comprehensive as it is now. And we previously didn't have like sort of the check and balances that we know that we have now to make sure that it's getting done and happening the right way, and it aligns to state statute and best practice. Something really new is play-based, advancing play-based programming, curriculum practices in pre-K, which we have been doing. It's more integrated than it was. And we want to build on that, but really moving it to kindergarten and grade one. So really trying to, when you're talking about play-based learning, so having students learn through activity and play, literacy, math, you know, the humanities. And so we're offering some increased training on that this year. And this is, you know, this is what our scholars are saying is really best practice, particularly post-COVID. Or we're into recovery, there's COVID is still around. And then we've had advisory programs in our middle and high school. I would say that you know, we've really evolved, particularly at the middle level. Both Browns River and Kamloops Hump have relooked at their advisory program and said, how are we going to build in social emotional learning and support into these advisory programs? In the high school, you know, I would say has had the advisory program for a while, and they're doing it well. I mean, we have you know, part of a professional teacher who is helping to coordinate this, making sure teachers have the right resources and they're prepared to be able to do this effectively. You know, on this front, I think we've made a lot of progress. There's still obviously work that needs to be done. What we want to do is collect more, you know, baseline data that we can, beyond the which is good, really goes back to youth behaviors risk survey, which is really 2022, I think, is the latest one that we have.
I have a question here.
Yes.
Don't slide. It just kind of goes into the implementation of the panorama, the tool. Is this like all students that are just seeking counseling help? Or is it just implemented in the high school
Everybody.
and middle school?
All grades 3-12.
Now, one of the things that, you know, this might be more than you want to know, but whenever you do a survey, you have to send something to parents saying we can opt out of it. And this would be definitely one that we would do that with.
So then do the students take it or?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And it's really, it's great because it's developmentally, you know, it's adjusted. There's a big, you know, host of questions. And so we've got some teams of people that are going to meet, and they're going to decide on what are the questions that are for first grade, you know, or I think, well, it's 3 and up, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So 3rd grade and up.
It's you utilize or modify the questions however you want. They also have like kind of pre-made questionnaires too. A number of districts in the state use it. Jeff and I actually visited with the director of curriculum of Addison Northwest and Virgins to look at not just the survey component, but also the data warehouse component. And they've used it very successfully there for collecting social emotional learning data.
So if a kid is struggling with like, what does this question mean? Are they allowed to ask a teacher for help, or is this like sit here in front of the computer and
You should have, they
Yeah,
would be able to
Oh yeah,
ask.
totally.
And there's
Okay.
And this is like, the questions, like we're just not making up the questions, like we're pulling from their bank of questions. And so they're written in a way that, and I've looked through a lot of the examples. We haven't selected every single question yet. They're very easy to interpret. And that's also the reason why it's grades 3 and up is for the younger grade, it just wouldn't work.
Gotcha.
So we've been planning hard and very intentionally on this priority, and we got a lot more supports in place, but I think we have a very strong plan. We're gonna be able to collect some good data. And then, we're trying to think of some other indicators that we might use, like, if Panorama also has a behavior, when there are behavior issues, you can track those. And there's different categories, so we'll be able to disaggregate that and compare it from, year to year to say, okay, why are there so many kids that are fighting? What do we need to do better? And how do we need to support them?
Are we recording this so the other half of the board can hear this conversation?
Yeah. Kevin has his hand up.
Thanks, Tara. I guess for me, just one other question on this one. Last week I got to sit with Dave Marlowe, co-curriculars director at high school, and in my mind I was like, wow, there is a lot of connectivity between co-curriculars and mental health, and there's a lot of stresses in that area and a lot of things going on in the sports world that cause both positive and negative on the mental health. Are you doing anything, John, to connect co-curriculars to this priority?
Well, some of that information could go into Panorama if there were behavior issues. So we've been tracking that data for years. As far as like the percentage of students that are either in a club or doing co-curricular or drama or band and chorus. So that's pretty interrelated. That is an indicator that we have highlighted in our annual report, and because it is very related to this. One of the other pieces I'd share is that they've developed a really in-depth, and he may have shared this with you, so forgive me, like training of coaches, so that we try to avoid some of the issues and students. I know I'm sure you've heard of some of the sportsmanship issues that have gone on, and some even some really negative things. So that's directly related to this.
Thank you.
I just had co-curricular, is that like after school
Oh,
sports? and
yeah,
stuff?
sorry.
Yeah.
That's sports and clubs, drama, music.
I'm not even sure if you could answer this question, but with the Panorama, if like you get a survey back and it's just like all like red flags, I know that I'm assuming they're anonymous, but like is there any way to figure like help or,
That's a good question.
Because it is anonymous, isn't it?
I know
Depends what it's for.
Yeah.
It's a very big tool. You
Mhm.
you can even have like teachers answer the questions for the students, for like the younger kids and
Yeah.
things like that. So I don't know all the details of the planning of how it's going to be rolled out, but there's different options. So just put it that way.
Right. I mean, I did know that because I looked at it pretty closely, that you can make it anonymous or not. I mean, we typically would be anonymous because you get the best
Yeah.
authentic information. I think if we had somebody that that was really so we're really concerned about, we'd try to figure it out.
And with this survey, it's really going to be around, I don't think there would be any like major red flags. It's really going to be more around like, do you feel seen? Do you feel like you're part of a community? And so that there could be some negatives there, and that would alert us to, okay, in this school, this grade level, we need to start doing some work on this front. So as opposed to like some of the data that's collected through the YRBS thing is more like things that you'd be like, whoa, this is problematic. But with that data, we don't have any details because it is anonymous. But it gives us like kind of a big picture idea of like, we got to look at this kind of broad area.
Yeah.
Okay. We've talked about this a lot. We tried to do a couple of things. One, offer something in the superintendent report, just letting people know where we are, and also in district happenings. We tried to give some updates to the community. We got some good feedback on that from folks in the community. if you've done some of this work, what I realized is it's really difficult. It's challenging because there's a lot of different ideas, right? But people aren't sure who's going to do what or even who wants to do it. So we've spent, a considerable amount of time last year, and I think we made some really good progress. And I know Andrew will corroborate this because he shared the same thing with me and Rebecca, is we really spent like this last year saying, okay, we got to develop a plan for, for this year. And so that's a tangible thing that we've put together. Some objectives for this year that we're going to do, and roles and responsibilities of some people in the district and getting them done. Some again very tangible things that we've done is that we have a district-wide council, and we meet, and the plan that we developed really came through our work and feedback from this committee. What we also try to do is take some of the training and the things that we've learned in the committee and bring them back to our school-based committees, because that's where the work really happens and the change happens. And we do have school-based councils at every one of our schools. And we're even getting better at sort of differentiating and offering some choice, because everybody's at a different place, if that makes sense, in their own journey around this, and new learning, new programming, and new resources. So those are two very, very tangible things that, it took some time to get together, some effort, some tears sometimes, and but we are there now in this process. And this, one of the things we also did is we hired 3 equity coaches. One that served full-time, that serves K to 8, pre-K to 8 really. And then we have 2 people at the high school that serve the high school community. And they help us, with school-based issues, training, and planning at the school level. The board, you formed a DIV committee in March, and you've been talking on about some of your plans. And you have a charter, and you have some short-term goals, and so that's another very tangible piece that has been accomplished. The other part is that wasn't happening prior to really, I think, some last year and even better this year, is just really ongoing training for everybody, making sure everybody has some baseline training around equity, racism, and inclusion, and that is happening for current employees and all new employees. And we have our new employee training, and that is going to be happening over the next couple of days, and part of it is this work. Then when we're constantly refining our curriculum, and when we're doing that, we're really trying to look at it from an equity and inclusion, belonging, and anti-bias racism lens. So, and there's some pretty good rubrics out there that you can use. And we're so new units, that's what we are trying to do. Something that is new this year is that our coaches, at the high school, they've been doing this more, but Kat is going to be meeting with our curriculum coaches and Andrew to be able to give that perspective, and that's going to happen this year. And then another thing that we've done is to really focus on our hiring practices, to make sure that the people that we are hiring, are committed to this work, that have some understanding of this work, and, that have some of the same goals and objectives that we do around making sure our schools are as welcoming, loving, and inclusive as they can be. And that includes, some model interview questions, and also broadening the advertising methods and tools that we use. A lot going on here as well. We have our plan and we'll be able to report out on that for next year, which I think will be good. So we can say, hey, did we do this? And I think that will be really good too. Also, Panorama, I do think some of the questions, at least some of that I've seen, hit on this as well, like how students are feeling. And then our staff too. A lot of work here. Yeah. Okay, ambitious goal. Tons, I would say significant amount of work has gone into this and a significant amount of progress. Now, and I'm going to dive into this, as deeply as I can, but so what our goal is. 2025, 90% of all our third graders will be proficient in reading according to our local assessment set. So right now, we don't have, I would say that we rely too much on one assessment, and we are really broadening how we're assessing, the things that we're assessing, and that is going to help us give you a much better picture of where students are at. So, and I'm grabbing some of this because I have
I'm glad you found that.
artifacts to talk a little bit about. So that's our goal, ambitious, right? We'll talk a little. I have another slide that we'll get into. We're not here. And again, I think we only are using, one local assessment as our indicator, and we got to broaden that because we need to, and it's best practice. So our literacy task force spent a lot of time last year, looking at data and developing a really comprehensive literacy plan that we're going to be integrating this year. So hours and hours of work, people like Andrew and Vicki Graff and Jen Cote and a lot of other people on this committee that spent a lot of time saying, okay, what do we need? We want to have the very best literacy program anywhere. So let's put the plan together to get there. And Beth Moore was on it, and we really came up with what I think is a super strong and comprehensive plan that, we used some of the information from the science of reading to do that. And this, the body of work that takes a look at what do kids need to make sure that they are proficient in reading. But that's not the only thing that we have. Because one of the things that we have learned is that when it comes to reading, there's no one perfect program. You need to have multiple programs that are going to meet the needs of students. So, we have included, phonics instruction and program, and we're going to be training people on this. We have a couple of new screeners in here, but Star Screener is something that we can give. It's super efficient. It gives really good information of where kids are at. We're going to be able to use that as part of our local assessment system. And then I write down a number of things that we have done. We've spent a lot of money on decodable tests for our youngest readers. And so that we can beef up those classroom libraries, we've done that. We're handing those out right now. Providing training on Heggerty, which is a phonics program, which has a good assessment as well. And UFly, which is the University of Florida Literacy Institute. And that again is a very high quality evidence-based program that gets on the essential components in reading, including phonics, and has a lot of assessment tools in it as well. Particularly some screeners that are really good to really diagnose where kids are having problems. And then you're providing other professional resources to our staff, including training and, some books to talk about how do you have, a really comprehensive and effective reading program. What do you need? What do you need to be tracking? What do you need to be focusing on? We have quadrupled at least the number of staff that are trained in the Orton Gillingham reading program. And OG, actually, you fly after the sequence follows the Orton Gillingham process and sequence for reading, and particularly phonemic awareness and proficiency. So those are things we've done that are going to really pay dividends over the next several years. So I have like a couple of artifacts that I just wanted to share with you. One, here's our handbook. It's a pretty comprehensive K-4 handbook that really lays out what are some of the things we have to do, what are the non-negotiables, what are some of the resources, why are we doing it, and then just some of the work that we need to do. So this is, it's 18 pages of a lot of work, but it'll take time, obviously, to implement this effectively, but we've got it. And we'll do some refining over time, but hopefully I'm impressing upon you the amount of work and intentionality that it took to really have a pretty major sea change in our literacy program. So I'm proud of this, grateful for the people that worked on it. And this is our English language arts just rollout. Talks about STAR 360. That's our screener and assessment. Hegarty, some of the training that we're going to put together. Hegarty instruction implementation. UFly phonics program, word study program. Daffodil assessments. And core phonics assessment, which is another. These are all assessments that we can use to diagnose and support students. The revised units of study, and then we really looked at also our benchmarks for reading, and redone those so that we, all with the goal of making sure that as many students as possible, we're hoping that 90% will be proficient in reading. By the time they hit third grade, because we know that's important. So, that is a long, that's a lot of information, but objectively, we've made progress in getting the systems and the programs and the people in place to get to that goal. Do I think it's going to take beyond 2025? Yeah. But I think if you're going to have goals, you want them to be ambitious, because that drives, a lot of times, I think it drives innovation and, and achievement. I wanted to show you the next slide too, if I could. So this is some data that we pulled, and I think this really emphasizes something, and hopefully that you take away with it what I did as well. So I'll just explain this chart for you briefly. So this was our K4 on Faunus and Pinnell, 63 proficient, and then spring of this past year, 62 proficient or above. When you look at that, what do you think? I mean, definitely we want to hire, but what else do you notice?
We're down, but it's that part of within the average, still not much apart.
Yeah, it's the margin of error, yep. And statistically, this is flat. You're right on the money. Exactly. That we're flat. And we're really pretty much flat. And this was the cohort. This cohort here is going to be the cohort in 2025. So they're this is spring of grade 1, they're grade 2, they'll be grade 3 next year. So I thought it was important for you to see this. So as what I like to think of myself as a scholarly, and I say this humbly, practitioner, we're stuck. this really does reinforce our need to make these changes. We're stuck. Now, there's some good news in here that, we didn't drop as much during COVID as some other places did, but if we keep doing what we were doing, we're not moving this. And so we have done a tremendous amount of work and change so that we can move these numbers. So that's what I took from this. And I think, Andrew as well, is this really emphasizes our need to make the changes that we did, and they're being implemented. We did some last year. We really did some of the pieces I talked about, but a lot of it was piloting it to figure out what we need, what was working and what wasn't. So this year, we have a much more complete and comprehensive plan. Very, very excited. Yeah, we are going to move this. I guarantee very few things, but I really, really believe that we are going to move these numbers over the next 2 years. And we really are. And the things and the investments that we've made, that we've kept in the budget and increased, this is how we're able to do it.
I just want to reiterate, what John was saying around how, our numbers from 22 to 23 are flat. That's actually a pretty big deal, because when you look at the data from a lot of school districts across the state and certainly nationally, they had huge drops during COVID. And when you look at multiple metrics, both our local assessment data, but also data such as SBAC, we do not drop really at all. If anything, we remain flat. And so though that may not look great, for me, that's a win, because it's showing that we have such a really strong foundation that we did not backslide. A lot of districts, huge backslide. And so that actually is really good news in my opinion.
We're going for 90. We're going
Yeah,
for it.
that was my question. Is this the metric that is going to be 90?
Yeah, except we're going to include more than just Foniston now. It'll be a better indicator of a comprehensive literacy program. So we'll have there'll be other local assessments that will be, and we can do this through Panorama, because Jeff showed me today, that we'll be able to put these together and say, how are we doing? And give you, a percentage of who's proficient and who isn't, including, how kids are doing on their report card.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Do we have, I'm assuming we have somewhere pre-COVID numbers of
Yep.
this group? Because wouldn't this group, the 63% be skewed because these were all COVID kids? If you want a real idea of how the new stuff they are implementing, we'd have to look at pre-COVID and the cohort that we're following.
We went back, if you look at, and I can send it to you, and I don't remember the numbers, but remember our ends policy last year? We did go back to pre-COVID, I believe. I think it was 18, 19, that's pre-COVID, right? So I'll send that to you, but we do have that.
All right.
Yep. And we dropped, there was but not, the margin of error again was not huge, but it was better than I had thought. But we're a long way from 90, and we have work to do, and another positive people are committed to it. So I'm excited, and not toxically optimistic, but very optimistic. Okay, now I'm going to hand this over to Andrew.
All right.
I could keep going, that, but I'm not going to, because I'm going to share the airplanes.
Oh, thank you.
But so some exciting work.
So I'll talk about the next 3 priorities. This one, multi-tiered system of supports, MTSS. So this is something that all school districts in the state are working on. And so I'll kind of indicate the things that we're actively doing and things that we're moving towards. One of the things that we initiated last year are this idea of guiding coalitions. So that's a fancy name for school leadership teams, which had already been in existence, but with guiding coalitions, they're really hyper-focused on student learning, as opposed to other important things that still need to be done, such as, you know, field trips or like the door is broken or whatever. But we want to make sure that we have a dedicated group that's specifically looking at teaching and learning, and that's what the Guided Coalition groups are doing. And so they have a very particular focus for their work, and they are the key supports within their building for a lot of the stuff that we're talking about today. One of the things that we've been working on for the last couple of years is articulating a shared understanding of what MTSS means in our district, because it can be broadly interpreted. And so we are crafting, kind of putting our own flavor on it, if you will, which is what all districts do, so that we all have a common understanding of this is what it means for our district, and importantly, the why of this work. And so that's something that we've been working on the last 2 years, but really hammering down last year. One of the pieces of this is to having each school develop what are called collective commitments or belief statements that are really centered around student teaching and learning. And so what has been happening the last 2 years is Pam Arnold, who I referenced down lower, she's our MTSS coach consultant. She's been working with each principal to look at their vision, look at their mission, and work with their staff to develop these collective commitments to help make sure that we have kind of these non-negotiables around student teaching and learning in each of the buildings related to the context of that building, so that we're not saying you have to do these collective commitments, that they're built by the staff with the principal. Pam Arnold has been really helpful to support individual principals in helping to articulate the MTSS system within their own building, and other elements related to kind of moving this work forward. And so she will continue to work with us this year. Not this year, but in past years, Dr. Mike Martin has worked with us around universal design for learning, which is part of what's called Tier 1, which is, if you look at MTSS as a pyramid, which is why we have that little pyramid icon there, it's the bottom of it, and that's what every student gets. And so we really wanted to make sure we had our building the capacity for that first instruction for students, and universal design for learning, which embraces student variability, is one of the things that we've been focused on. That's also built into the work of the state. So the Vermont MTSS field guide references UDL a lot. The upcoming revision of the educational quality standards, which should be approved here by the State Board of Education soon, also make a lot of references to universal design for learning as well. And so he kind of provided a foundational capacity building component. We've also been working hard to ensure that our educational support team, or EST, framework and process is fairly consistent and common between our schools. Again, we're still in the process of making refinements to that and making it work within some of the new special education rule changes that are came in on July 1st. ESTs are part of state statute, so there's something that all schools have to do. We have been collecting some qualitative data. So for instance, back in May, I put together a kind of overview presentation around MTSS that all principals led in their schools. And then there's a feedback form that teachers filled out. It was a handwritten form that I collected. And so I went through all of those to identify common themes and patterns. And it was pretty consistent across all the schools that teachers are understanding kind of the impetus behind this work, so they understand the why, and there's still some folks who are a little confused, but those are pockets. Overall, the main kind of theme from looking at those surveys was that folks are understanding kind of where we're going. However, we want to drill down even further. And so we developed a SMART goal related to the progress monitoring of MTSS. So a SMART goal is specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. And so if you go to the next slide, you can see this particular goal. And really the intent of this is to be really specific and to make sure that we're checking progress throughout the year. And so what we will do for this is there will be multiple times where we provide a check-in, so some sort of survey to ask teachers where they're at with this particular goal. This particular goal related to MTSS is connected to what's called formative assessment. Formative assessment is not new. It's old. It's been around since, formally, like 1997 is when the research really came out on formative assessment. And the whole idea is that we're constantly checking on student progress, monitoring while the learning is still happening. And so we want to make sure that that practice is well embedded in all of our classrooms. And it is for the most part, because we've been doing this work for a while, but we want to make sure that that is true across the board, across our schools. And so we're really going to zero in on that formative assessment piece, which is also connected with this concept of professional learning communities, which I'll go on to next. So professional learning communities, or PLCs, again, a lot of literature on this topic, but essentially it's about making sure that teachers are working with their colleagues, specifically grade level colleagues, or at the upper levels content colleagues, and that they're not working in isolation, and that they're really focused on, again, student learning, that they're looking at student data to see how their students are doing, and most importantly, what do they do when students aren't learning. And so though this phrase, PLCs, is fairly new here, it actually builds off of the past work around data teams, which one of our coaches, Christian Quartermach, has been doing for quite a while. And so it's really just kind of a refined iteration of that data team work, because the intent is the same, and that is to look at student data, respond to that student data in a collective manner to make sure that we're supporting our students as well as we can. It varies a little bit from school to school, but the minimum is that every week these teams have 40 minutes to meet. It would be great if we could have longer. We're looking to find ways to provide more time, but at this time it's about 40 minutes that fit within the schedule so that they have that time. We're also this year, this is new, building into our early release days is focusing on district level PLC collaborative teams. So instead of just the first grade teachers RES working together, it's all the first grade teachers across the district so that they can learn from one another. And so that's being built in as well. And again, going back to that constellation visual from the beginning, I think an important piece to know is that none of these elements operates in isolation. They actually complement one another. So the PLC collaborative team piece is not just this thing over here. That really is interconnected with our educational support team work and the broader MTSS work. So all these things are interconnected. We also have a SMART goal related to that, and that goal is really focused on making sure we have common, consistent agendas, that the work is focused on looking at student data, and that really these routines become part of how school operates. And coming out of COVID, where there was a lot of disruption of routines and kind of the way of doing things, we're trying to build that routine back in. So it's just kind of how we do things in schools, and that just takes some time to do. We started this work last year and just kind of had a few tight elements, and those tight elements were that you'll meet 40 minutes a week. You'll have a common agenda, and really kind of left it at that to kind of let folks sort it out. This year, we're getting a little more specific to make sure that data analysis is part of that work. And so we're just trying to get a little tighter each time, while still simultaneously making sure that teachers have a certain level of autonomy and flexibility, and that this work is not too prescribed.
And so one of the things that Andrew touched upon that's important is we're trying to do this like thoughtfully and incrementally, not overwhelm teachers. Because when you start talking about this, it's big, and you know, it can be a little bit scary. So we're just trying to break it down into pieces so it becomes like embedded into what we're doing, just sort of organically and naturally.
And I'll build off of that a little more on the last slide too. So you can go to the curriculum one. You know, one of the things that I noticed right off the bat when I came to this district is how well coordinated our curriculum already is. I haven't seen the curriculum at every single district in the state. I have seen a lot of them, and I can say with a high degree of confidence that we probably have one of the most highly aligned and coordinated curricula in the entire state. And that, so we are on a very firm footing. That doesn't mean the work is done. This work is never done. We actually have, and our coaches are critical with this, as our teachers too, to constantly look at this and refine it. So though we are in a good spot and we're, you know, making refinements, we're never going to technically be done with this work. one of the key pieces of this work are the curriculum committees, which are led by both administrators and coaches and embody teachers from across the district. And so they really are the decision makers around looking at this, and they meet, it varies from year to year. Next year, we're going to be meeting 4 times a year. Last year, it was 3 times a year. And that process has been around well before I got here. And that's a critical piece of this alignment work. Last year, I also did a lot with the middle and high schools to ensure that there's a closer alignment between 8th and 9th grade. And so that's something else we'll continue to do this year, because we have 2 sending middle schools to the high school. And not that we want to prescribe things or have it be mirror images of each other, but we do want to ensure, for equity's sake, that when an 8th grader goes to the high school from Camel's Hump, that they're not going to have a completely different experience than what someone at Browns River had. And so we want to make sure that those are in alignment, and we made a lot of progress with that. Another big win from last year is the development of what we're calling benchmark understanding. So you can think of those as kind of like standards, and then underneath those you have smaller grain size learning targets that get a little more specific around what we want students to know and do. And so we have developed benchmark understandings for ELA, math, science, and social studies. We have learning targets for math and ELA, and we're in the development of learning targets for social studies and science. So that was a huge win from last year. And at the high school level, they continue to refine the work that they've been doing around their proficiency-based graduation requirements. So still ongoing work with curriculum, but this is something that we are, and again, this was already here before I came here, really, really coordinated curriculum, both vertically and horizontally. Vertically in that it's building on itself, so that when each student kind of moves from one grade level to the next, they're prepared for that, but also horizontally in that what students experience at Brewster Pierce and what students experience at Underhill Central are not going to be, 2 very different things. We want to make sure that there's very similar experiences and opportunities to learn at the different schools. And then related to all of this, kind of pull it all together, is this idea of implementation infrastructure. And so implementation is really the crux of all of this, is actually putting it into practice. And we have a very robust implementation infrastructure here. Our supervision evaluation system, which I'd really like to, we'll call it a professional growth system, is really emphasized on having teachers to develop goals related to these priorities so that they're personally working to improve related to these different things we're working on. Our instructional coaching team, which I would say we probably do have the best instructional coaching team in the entire state, definitely the most robust one. And they are a linchpin to all of this work. They are another piece of this, because without them, this work does not happen. They are crucial. We also have those school guiding coalitions, so the school leadership teams, so the principal in conjunction with key players in the building are helping to ensure that this work moves forward in the context of each of the buildings. And then those PLC collaborative teams, so those grade level content teams, are another piece of this. And so all these pieces are interrelated, and those structures are really going to help move this work forward. And so, as John was saying, we have some pretty ambitious goals. There's a lot of moving parts, but we've also been really intentional to ensure that this work is sustainable, incremental, and that we don't want to overwhelm anyone, whether that's teachers or principals or students for that matter. And I feel that we have a very solid plan that we can move this work forward. So we have momentum, but not so fast or so much that it's too much for folks. So that's all I got.
So we've a lot of good work going on. I say that again pretty humbly, but we've really been intentional about the work that we tried to do and optimize the resources that we do have in our system to be able to do that. I think sky's the limit.
So that was a lot.
That was a lot. Are there questions? Anything that we haven't brought up? It's good work. It's really good work.
Tara, I guess comment, but the linkage for the board, it's it's good to know where the administration is headed, what we've done, where we're going. We did our self-reflection thingy last week, and what can the board do to help progress these initiatives? Is the work for us? Like, how do we help? How do we get out of the way? What are we going to be doing this year that's aligned with these goals? What are we going to be doing that's not? So anything that you can help us, to help you is good to know as we continue to kind of get updated from you on these initiatives. But anything that comes to mind offhand?
I mean, it's really with Act 127. I think we're in a yes, you can. I didn't want to forget. With Act 127, I think we're going to really need the board's help on supporting community members and understanding that the impacts. But if we really dilute our programs and make don't keep the investments that we've made over the last several years, we won't be able to meet these priorities.
And I would just add, I think a key role for the board and something that John and I can do during board meetings is to help community members and parents understand what some of this stuff means. Certainly, parents are going to be learning this through principals and staff, or notes and things from the school, but helping others in the community to see what this means, because in education, like any profession, there's a lot of jargon, MTSS, PLC, EST, etc., and that can be overwhelming. But to help translate what some of this work means and why this work is important, I think it's a really critical piece of the work of the board.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's some opportunities there that probably don't take a lot of effort, but everything takes a little bit. Is just how do we position these priorities in a way in which our community and board, frankly, can understand and articulate. Like when you double click on one of these, can I get the, what does this mean for the community? What does this mean for the staff? What does it mean to the student? What are we, actively working on? Where do we, those types of, a lot of communication points there, but then, how do these relate back to what you're seeing in the budget in 6 months from now? We start that work now, we'll be in good shape come February.
Definitely. Yep.
You want to move on to the superintendent report?
Yes. I mean, so if you have questions about it, please let me know. But a couple of highlights. I had a printed version. I'm just gonna pull it up. So this summer was, there were some challenges this summer, and I really give a lot of credit to our maintenance folks because the weather really impacted our ability to get things done because everybody was backed up. And, the building projects that we were able to get done and the way the buildings look right now, and I think Andrew would agree, are pretty impressive for buildings that are, so decades and decades old, many of them 60s and 70s. There's been a lot of care and a lot of support to make sure that they're healthy and safe, and that we've done some of the maintenance that we need to do to optimize the facilities. And then staffing, we got a good crew of new staff members, and excited and to welcome them. And we do still have some positions that were really kind of hard for us to fill, and then most of those are on the support staff side right now. Most of our teaching positions have been filled. I mean, the vast majority, with the exception of some long-term subs that aren't imminent. Well, are imminent, but not super imminent. So I think we're ready to start the new school year. And the only other thing I wanted to highlight is that one of the board had asked me to just draft some last day of school language. So I put that in my report too. I mean, what I would ask you to do is just maybe not, I mean, I don't recommend tonight, but just take a look at it. Let me know what you think at the next meeting. You know, we try to, it's really challenging for people to plan in our current society for their children, with the way our calendar's set up. So having a really a pretty definitive date of when we're going to be done to meet statute, I think would be helpful to our families. And it's not going to negatively impact education. So that's it.
Question. How do our 55 new staff people compare, do you know, with the last couple of years?
It's about post-COVID, about the same. Yep.
If we believe the other headlines, it sounds like we're in much better shape than the great, both not just in Vermont, but across the country.
We are.
Very much so.
It's amazing. Like, you can't pick up a periodical right now without reading about teacher shortages. So I give a ton of credit to our building-based administrators and Rebecca Tebow for being like so on it. Like, if there's a good candidate, she's getting them in, we're interviewing them, and we're hiring them. I think
They're operating at light speed.
yeah. So that has been really huge. But we're in good shape.
Did somebody
John.
put something in the
So I noticed the gas line was being replaced. Was that one of those August surprises that we sometimes get? And did we have to pay for that? What was the reason behind it?
Well, they're putting in natural gas.
We don't have natural gas now.
No, not in high school.
Oh, what is it? Propane?
It is. We got wood chips and oil.
Oil. Okay. Oil.
So
then diesel.
Right
So
now they're putting in.
was that in lieu of replacing a gas tank or oil tank? So I should say.
No, it's a more it's greener and it is
Right.
less costly.
I recall it might be for next year. I don't remember, but there was a need to replace an underground tank.
Oh yeah, that's the bus. That's for the diesel fuel.
And did that get done?
No, it hasn't gotten done yet.
Okay.
It did pass inspection, something we need to do. But it's a different, when we were doing that, we were gonna take the gas tank out too. That makes sense.
So this is the first time that we're running natural gas and we're putting in new burner to supplement the wood chip. So that's pretty cool.
Yep.
Okay.
So-
And then on the switching in gears, the last day of school procedures, this is relatively novel, isn't it? To have kind of the premeditated plan, which I appreciate. And then we're basically saying, if we get to the 18th and we don't have the minimum number of days, we're going to submit for a waiver. Have we ever
Yep.
done that?
We never have, but school districts have.
Other school districts have, and they've been approved?
Yep. Not always, but often.
Okay.
Yep. And if you remember during COVID that they waived,
Oh, of course,
didn't
they
have-
have everything in COVID, but,
Yep.
so, yeah, I mean, I don't know how others on the board feel about it, but this is kind of a significant, position, like, to make, and just to highlight that, I guess.
I think I was just, I'm heeding John's precursor to digest it and save it for the next meeting. But I think it's a good conversation to have because, John, as you sort of said, and led this piece, is like a lot of it comes down to planning for people and the uncertainty of weather closures throughout the year, other reasons to lose days. So I guess the only question I'd throw out there is just that idea of what do we need to do to ensure that we would get a waiver?
Well, it's hard.
Yeah.
It's really up to the Secretary of Ed. But I can I can get a little bit more information on that.
On who the new Secretary of Ed is going to be?
Yeah, we don't know. This, again, this is something I really think the board would need to vote on and approve because it is connected to our collective bargaining agreement. And it's a standing practice that would live beyond my time here if it was passed. So, but what I have recognized is that more and more, these summer programs and care and camps are super competitive. And it really creates like a friction which we don't really want to have between sometimes schools and parents and families because, they're a little bit upset with the school because their child might miss field day or because we've had to push these events back. So it would just really, it not only helps parents, but it helps schools plan more effectively. So families and caregivers can say, hey, I know what's going on. And 10 years ago, this wasn't as big an issue as it is now.
Just for clarification, so if you get to the 175 days prior to the 18th, then the school end earlier? Or are we just still?
Yeah. We would end on the 175th day.
Okay.
And we would take the 3 other days and make them into earned in service time for teachers and staff.
So like the earliest school would get out in theory. 18th would be the 15th, right? Because it's 3 days prior. Oh, I'm looking at July, sorry. Friday the 14th or?
Yeah, I think if you look at this year, it would be that Friday,
Okay.
I think, right? Or maybe I have to
It says
look.
the 13th, which is a Thursday, is the last school
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, so if we don't have any snow days, we're fine, right? We get 178 in, we're good. If we get 5 snow days, then we would be in trouble. Or
Every
we
day
would
adds
need to
on.
make some decisions. Yep.
So
And the other, the weather is getting more and more challenging. I'm Captain Obvious here. Definitely, it's getting more and more hard to predict and more challenging than I have ever seen in my time in Vermont. Having to cancel, and I know we want to move on, but having to cancel summer programming has never ever happened. So, weather has just really become a factor we got to deal with.
Hurricanes in California.
Yeah.
Wildfire smoke in Vermont.
So would it
Yeah.
be? Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Ethan.
Oh, I was just gonna say, would it be a little presumptive to move to accept the superintendent's report?
No,
Do we need to? Yeah, I don't think this is something we vote on.
All right. How about we move to
We're all
the approve?
gonna go back and consider the language for the end of the school procedures and give John feedback.
I think Ethan was asking to move on to the next agenda item though.
We could get stuck on weather for a while.
I just know where this can go, and I would be a big part of it. So
Stu's still got like 2 hours of a drive left. So
Yeah.
Andrew wants a sandwich, okay?
All right, okay. So can I get a motion to approve the meeting minutes from June 12th?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? See, got that.
No, we don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, I'll approve. Where am I going? Oh my God.
Call for it.
Oh my God. All in favor?
I,
Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? The minutes pass. Committee reports. Lisa, you want to dive in?
I think I actually reported out of this the last meeting. So we had passed a charter and set some goals for the coming year. Looking forward to meeting and getting going on them.
Katie's not here for community engagement. The DEIB committee, we actually met last week after the retreat. Those notes are not ready yet. I give a lot of credit to Pat because when I'm asked to be secretary and take notes, it takes me like 3 weeks to type them up. But we are moving forward on an action plan. Andrew's doing a little research for us, little homework to find out, to help get a facilitator to do identity work amongst the board ourselves. And then we're going to start talking about drafting an equity policy. And the VSBA does have a draft policy that we'll be able to look at. Regional collaboration. Kevin, is that you? Or is that Ethan? For regional collaboration?
I'll take
Or was
it.
that Tom? You'll take it?
I don't know if we've had a meeting since our last board meeting, since our last regional meeting. Edie, Ethan, and I met with Mike and John to talk to Mike Weston about his perspective primarily around regional technical centers. I thought it was a really good discussion. It's obviously recorded. Minutes are well documented there. Our next meeting that we had scheduled was in early August. We weren't able to make that happen, so we're going to be meeting again tomorrow, I believe.
Tomorrow, 8:30.
Yep, tomorrow morning, 8:30. So we can just stay on this call, roll right into it. To kind of figure out where do we go from there. It's interesting that our committee has kind of jumped on this regional technical center kind of work stream, and where does it fit in our six priorities? It's a little bit of a stretch, but we do feel like it's an area that we can add some value with some focus. So we're going to stay on that thread, and then there's some other initiatives we're going to pick up once we figure out what we're going to do with this this technical center thread. So that's a quick update there.
Thanks. HR, Edie's not here. Other business? Real quickly, Edie wanted me to remind everybody that the VSBA annual conference is October 26th through the 27th at Lake Maury. And remind me, the district will pay for board members to go.
Yep.
Right, both the registration fee and the hotel.
Yep.
How far in advance do you need that information? Because registration's open for that conference.
I mean, what I'm thinking. It doesn't have to be too, anytime really.
Okay.
You sign up, you let us know, it doesn't, it can be the end of September, the beginning of October.
I have a planner, right? If something doesn't go on my calendar now.
I hear you.
It's not gonna happen. And then the VSBA regional meeting is September 6th. It's a 6 p.m. virtual meeting.
Tara?
Yes.
On the, the event that we had last week, I thought it went really well and just wanted to give kudos out to John, Andrew, and Edie, and anyone else who was involved in pulling that off. I actually personally got a lot out of it with the small group sessions, and hope we can continue that. And I think Edie is definitely open to hearing any feedback from board members if they want to share positives and things we can do better for next time.
I'd just like to reiterate that I had a great time. I thought it was, and I heard that from a lot of other colleagues as well, that they really appreciated sitting down with a lot of you and that they learned a lot that helped to refine their role as leaders. And I think it was just a good time to get to know each other a little bit better too.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, having only been to one other of our retreats, I think that was the best one.
It was very good. Yep, it was very good.
I too got a lot out of it. And I'm very thankful that we had it.
Yeah, I think they're all positive, exceeded my expectations.
I agree. Concur. I know Edie wants to debrief in our first September meeting. But Kevin, like you said, we could send them feedback ahead of time too. Anything else? Motion to adjourn? Second.
Don't have to discuss that.
All in favor?
Drive safe, everybody. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Ethan.
Yeah.
Yeah.